My talk today is on the fingerprinting methodology that the IPCC has been using and climate scientists have been using for a long time to connect greenhouse gases to observed climate change. What that comes down to is a statistical question. Is there a statistically significant change in the climate? And if there is, can we say anything about the cause? And the attribution methodology works by comparing observed patterns of change in the climate to those generated by climate models. This requires us to make a few assumptions, one of which is we have to assume that the climate models are providing a true and complete representation of the climate. Now, another important feature of this type of analysis is it uses a statistical methodology called regression analysis. And regression analysis is the bread and butter of economics. A lot of the theory of regression methods has been developed within the economics profession. This whole discussion is about linear regression and the uses and abuses of linear regression. And the problem is that a lot of people in the climate science field are not well trained in regression methods. This is the paper that I'm focusing on in my critical analysis. The important thing is they said that their method yields unbiased and precise answers. And then they also said you can check your work using a special statistical test that they proposed. And they said that this statistical test will tell you if your model is valid or not. And they called it the residual consistency test, or the RC test. It proved to be very popular, as immediately seized upon by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and was used heavily ever since. They specifically referred to the use of the optimal fingerprinting method as the basis for being able to ramp up their claims about attribution. They referred to new detection techniques that have been applied. Detection and attribution studies consistently find evidence for an anthropogenic signal in the climate record of the last 35 to 50 years. And using that evidence in the light of new evidence and taking into account the remaining uncertainties, most of the observed warming over the last 50 years is likely to have been due to the increase in greenhouse gas concentrations. So they use the word likely there, but before long they were ramping up their claim of certainty. So in the next IPCC report, fourth assessment report, they upgraded the conclusion to very likely. They held to that. In the fifth assessment report, they were depended heavily on use of the optimal fingerprinting method. And in the sixth assessment report that just came out, they upgraded the conclusion to unequivocal. In regression analysis, there's a very important result called the Gauss-Markov theorem. And when the Gauss-Markov theorem applies, your regression model is said to yield what are called blue estimates, meaning best linear unbiased estimator, blue for short. So Allen and Tet set up this regression model, and they said they can invoke the Gauss-Markov theorem to prove that their estimator is blue, linear, unbiased, and efficient. The thing is, the Gauss-Markov theorem, it doesn't automatically hold. There are a lot of things that can cause the Gauss-Markov theorem not to hold. It's taught in every introductory econometrics course. There are a lot of tests for the various ways that this theorem can fail. And if it fails, what it means is your coefficient estimates then can be biased and they can be imprecise. And so then you have to put in place remedies to fix the problem. You can't just find out that one of the Gauss-Markov conditions has failed and then just carry on, because you don't know that your coefficients mean anything. They may be biased and completely inaccurate. The problem with the Allen and Tet 1999 paper is that when they said they can invoke the Gauss-Markov theorem, they got it wrong. They didn't state the theorem correctly. They didn't list the necessary conditions. In fact, they omitted the most important one. And then they set up this estimator, or this regression model, that can't satisfy the Gauss-Markov theorem. I've written several papers on this topic of critiquing the attribution methodology. And this first one, I submitted it to Climate Dynamics, to the same journal that published the Allen and Tet paper. And after an extensive review process, it was accepted for publication. In that paper, there are numerous mathematical errors in AT 99 and untrue claims about the reliability of the results of that procedure. And I also showed that the test that they proposed yields meaningless results. So what are the implications? The implications were summed up very briefly by my colleague Richard Toll, who's one of the best-known climate economists in the world. He summed it up by saying, another literature that is entirely wrong. He was referring there to the attribution literature that's dependent on the Allen and Tett paper, and then elaborated on that by saying, Allen and Tett introduced an FGLS estimator that is wrong and a test to show that they're right when they're not. And that pretty much sums it up. Despite these claims of the IPCC that I referred to, their amplified levels of certainty over the years, there is no basis for confidence that any applications of the Allen and Tett fingerprinting method yields valid results. And a huge amount of the attribution literature, which includes precipitation, atmospheric moisture, snow cover, forest fires, all kinds of things, is based on a method that gives wrong and meaningless results. The fact that the method fails the Gauss-Markov theorem conditions and the fact that tests have not been applied for these failures, this matters. These results that are out there, we just can't have the confidence in them that people have thought. Have Allen and Tett responded? They don't address any of the technical issues, but the main thing is they have not yet tried to refute anything in my paper. They have not yet said that they fundamentally disagree with it. The main thing they're saying is, it doesn't really matter because we use different methods now. So maybe this would have mattered 20 years ago, but people are still relying on the same underlying technique. In fact, one of the new methods that they refer to, it's the AT99 method with another step added to it, and that extra step actually makes things worse. If we found out that the police have been sending people to jail for using a fingerprinting method that we now realize gives misleading answers, it's not enough to just say, well, we hope the convictions hold up and it's up to the people in jail to prove that they're innocent. To summarize this new paper, it shows that the basis for claims of certainty around climate attribution is mathematically flawed and invalid. And I want to emphasize that these are basic points. I should not have been the first to bring this up. And what it shows me is that people with serious statistical training have not looked at this literature. And it's been operating in the shadows for about 20 years.